A note before we start. This episode contains descriptions of violence. From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiet. It's Wednesday, January 15. Australia's special envoy to combat anti-Semitism has called on Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to convene the National Cabinet to tackle the surge in Jewish hatred. In an extraordinary intervention, Gillian Segal urged federal and state leaders to beef up their police and judicial responses to anti-Semitic attacks. A 13-year-old boy has been charged with attempted murder after he allegedly stabbed a 63-year-old woman at a supermarket in Ipswich. But the Queensland government's promise to get a handle on youth crime could fail thanks to a legal technicality. That's today's episode. It was a hot one in Ipswich on Monday. The city, located about 40 kilometres southwest of the Brisbane CBD, is home to about 250,000 people. And it was on that steamy afternoon that one of them, a 63-year-old woman, was going about her business at the Coles supermarket at the Yamanto Central Shopping Centre. She would have felt a searing pain as a knife was violently and unexpectedly thrust into her back. It's not known if she interacted with the alleged 13-year-old perpetrator before the incident occurred. Security guards and shoppers stopped the boy as he allegedly attempted to flee the scene, holding him until police arrived. The woman was rushed to Brisbane's Princess Alexandra Hospital with the knife still in her back. She's still there in the hospital's intensive care unit, in a critical but stable condition. Now, as Queenslanders grapple with this apparently random act of violence, the state's new adult crime, adult time laws are facing their first big test.
We heard a lot during the election campaign about adult crime, adult time, and the now Premier David Crisafulli promised all through the election that they would be law by Christmas.
Lydia Lynch is a Queensland political reporter with The Australian.
So those laws passed on December 12 and they were assented on December 13.
Adult crime, adult time is now a reality in Queensland, with the Premier one step closer to fulfilling a key election promise.
Usually in Queensland, we have about a 6-week period of time where laws are assessed because we don't have an upper house here. There's no Senate. So there's extra levels of scrutiny that are applied to legislation. But given he had promised to have the laws passed by Christmas, the public consultation period was shortened to just 1 week. And some of the warnings that were given by stakeholders and the now opposition is that there might be some unintended consequences in the law that weren't properly examined. So they came into effect December 13, so it's alleged crimes committed after that. And there are 13 different offences that are covered. There are things like manslaughter, grievous bodily harm, dangerous operation of a vehicle, burglary, robbery. And what the legislation did was it put a mandatory minimum sentence, which we have for adults here in Queensland. So you might have a crime where the maximum sentence was 5 years, and for an adult it was 10 years. So just bringing that into line. So it'll be interesting to see what happens through the courts, because often when a judge is sentencing, they might not always enforce a maximum sentence unless a crime's particularly heinous.
On Tuesday, less than 3 months after he won the top job, Premier David Crisafulli said this latest incident proves why the new laws are necessary.
I reflect that this incident has occurred so close and within a year of what we saw happen to Violin White. And there's a sense of deja vu for the state. And there's exactly the kinds of incidents that Queenslanders have had enough of.
70-year-old grandmother Violin White was killed during an alleged carjacking in Redbank Plains, west of Brisbane, in early 2024. A 16-year-old boy was arrested and charged with murder, unlawful use of a motor vehicle, and 3 counts of stealing. He'll be held in custody until a judge decides if he should face trial. But that alleged incident isn't subject to the new adult crime, adult time laws because it occurred before December.
My resolve to dealing with it is as strong as ever. And I want Queenslanders to know how much we understand that incidents like this just rock the fabric of who we are.
The 13-year-old alleged perpetrator of the Ipswich stabbing was remanded in custody on Monday night, and by Tuesday morning, he'd been charged with attempted murder. Shortly after, he faced Ipswich Children's Court, where the matter will return on February 25. If the boy were to be convicted and sentenced like an adult for his alleged crime, he could be facing a hefty sentence.
If a child is as young as 11 and they are found guilty of murder, they'll face a mandatory minimum life sentence, which is 20 years in Queensland, and that's the same as an adult. For the other 12 offences listed in the legislation, things like grievous bodily harm, serious assault, they really just lifted the maximum penalties. For example, previously, if a child was found guilty of committing grievous bodily harm, the maximum sentence they could face was 7 years. Under the new laws, they can face 14 years.
But the thing is, this particular crime, attempt to murder, isn't covered by the government's new laws, meaning this alleged perpetrator could evade adult sentencing on a technicality. We'll have more on that after the break. On Tuesday, David Crisafulli was asked why attempted murder wasn't included in the first tranche of adult crime, adult time legislation.
We implemented the changes that we took to the election. There will be more changes to the Youth Justice Act, many more. That was a commitment we took to the people of Queensland as we've been putting that expert panel together to work out exactly what future waves of those changes look like, and believe me, they will occur.
The Queensland Premier rejected suggestions this latest incident, the allegedly unprovoked stabbing of a woman in her 60s at an Ipswich supermarket, means Queenslanders aren't safer under his government. But the question now is, how will voters feel if the long-promised crime crackdown falls over at the first hurdle? Here's Lydia Lynch.
It's been an issue in the regions for a number of years, but the issue of youth crime really became a statewide central political issue during the last term of government, and it was all driven by David Crisafulli, who was then the opposition leader. He was really focused on targeting what he called this youth crime crisis that was spinning out of control. He spoke about how Labor had made changes to the law 10 years ago, and that had created this new generation of young people that felt they were untouchable by the law.
We want youth criminals to understand that the days of their rights being greater than the rights of the victim are a thing of the past.
During the campaign, he promised that he would resign as Premier if there was not a reduction in the number of crime victims in Queensland during his first 4-year term. So this isn't just any old political issue in Queensland. This is really make or break for David Crisafulli, and he has promised voters to address it. This latest alleged crime might have some questions being thrown up for people about whether these adult crime, adult time laws will actually lead to a reduction in youth crime. We've spoken to some lawyers and stakeholders who say harsher penalties aren't actually going to fix the problem or lead to a reduction in youth crime because they don't address the root causes of why people are going out and offending, whether that's drug addiction or they might come from a really difficult home facing violence. The Premier has said that he wants to invest more in early intervention as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next year or two to see whether or not there really is a change in crime, because that's what he has promised to do.
Lydia Lynch is a Queensland political reporter with The Australian. You can read all the latest on this story, as well as all the nation's best news, sport, politics and business right now at theaustralian.com.au.